Jessii Vee, and as you can tell by the title of today's video, we're going to be talking about some very strange old black and white horror movies. Now, you guys know how much I love horror movies. I live for them. But if you go way back in time to even the early 1900s, there were a lot of horror movies that came out that were just bizarre. Now, I can only talk about a handful of them in this video, but there are so many, so I'm thinking of maybe making this into a mini-series. But before we get started, you've probably already seen this new background behind me from my other two videos, but if you have not, it is a moon with a bunch of bugs all over it. So weird. And if you would like to win it, all you have to do is be subscribed to this channel, so my Jessii Vee channel, turn on your notification bell, and then head over to my fourth Instagram account, which I have named The Whimsy Wonders. Basically, I'm going to be making handmade jewelry from scratch and putting them on that Instagram account. I'm so excited about it. Go follow it if you would like to win this background behind me. And speaking of jewelry, I am currently wearing a fairy necklace. This is what it looks like up close. It kind of looks like Tinkerbell, actually. I love that. I love Tinkerbell. This was not handmade by me. This is just our regular merch stock. I think we have 11 of these left, so I will link it down below if you would like one. We love fairies. All right, so let's jump right into this video. Before I talk about the specific films, I want to just briefly talk about horror movie history. The very first horror movie was made in 1896. It was a silent film called The Haunted Castle. And then between the 1900s and the 1930s, supernatural films became so popular to make. That's when some of the most recognized classics were made, like Frankenstein, The Mummy, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dracula. And then the 70s and 80s were a bunch of movies about haunted houses and people being possessed. The Exorcist came out in 1973, which is an extremely popular movie. And then in the 80s, they got more into slasher films. Films like Halloween, Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street. So horror movies have been constantly evolving and changing. It was like every decade they came out with like a new horror movie theme. And while there are really amazing classics out there, which I love, there are also the other side of horror movies where they're just bizarre and random. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about some of the strangest horror movies ever created. And just because they're strange doesn't mean they're not good. It just means they're strange. The first one is called The Creature from the Black Lagoon. This movie came out in 1954, and the monster featured in the film became one of the most influential and scariest creatures of the 50s. This movie is about a scientific expedition searching for fossils along the Amazon River when they discover a prehistoric gill man in the legendary Black Lagoon. Now, the explorers end up catching this creature, but it escapes, and it actually falls in love with one of the women on the expedition and kidnaps her. Now, to us looking back at this film, it probably doesn't seem that scary. I mean, it literally is just a guy like dressed up in this weird fish suit, but that's because we grew up in a time of CGI where everything looks so realistic. But back then, people were terrified because it looked so real for the time. And you guys know I find open water so scary. So if I was out there swimming and I saw a fish man coming to get me, woo, I'd be out of there. All right, next we have a movie called Them. This movie came out in 1954, and it's literally about giant ants, which is completely understandable why it freaks so many people out going to see this movie in theaters back in the day. Basically, this movie starts out being about this shop owner who is killed under mysterious circumstances. So obviously the police come and start investigating what happened to him. And they meet a local drunk who said he had seen giant ants eating sugar from an overturned train. Now, at first, the police don't believe this drunk man because what he's saying is obviously crazy. I mean, giant ants? But then two small boys are taken by the ants, so the cops get serious about finding a solution. Now, like I said, back then they had no CGI, so the way they made these ants is they were basically giant puppets on set. I mean, imagine being that actor who had to interact with these giant fluffy ant puppets. Kind of creepy. Next, we have a movie called The Birds. This movie came out in 1963, and it was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It's about a woman named Melanie Daniels, who is a modern rich socialite who always gets what she wants. She ends up driving to Bodega Bay for the weekend and notices that the birds are starting to act very strange. A seagull attacks Melanie as she is crossing the bay in a small boat, and then a neighbor turns up dead, obviously the victim of a bird attack. Soon, birds in the hundreds and thousands are attacking anyone they find outdoors. And in the movie, they can't figure out why this is happening. They don't know why the birds are suddenly turning so vicious. And as the birds continue their vicious attacks, survival becomes the priority. Now, I've never seen this movie, but I remember my grandma showed my sister this movie and my sister was horrified. And apparently after people watched this back in the day, when they actually stepped out of the theater and saw any birds flying around, they were so freaked out. I mean, this movie would totally change my perspective on birds. So I'm just not gonna watch it. Next, we have a movie called Carnival of Souls. This movie came out in 1962, and in the movie, a street race results in one of the cars being thrown off a bridge and into the muddy river below. Now, there were 3 people in this car when it was thrown off the bridge, and only one survived, and her name was Mary. And obviously, after the incident, being the only one who came out of it okay, she was having PTSD, she was just struggling with anxiety, and she decides to travel to Utah. She wants to get out of her town where that happens, and she becomes a church organist in Utah. On her drive to Utah, she begins to see visions of a man, almost as an apparition, who she believes is out to get her. Mary believes that the visions of this man have something to do with an abandoned carnival site located at the outskirts of town. She feels oddly drawn to this carnival site. So I think this movie is about this creepy apparition of a man who keeps bothering her. He keeps showing up out of nowhere, appearing just in her house while she's doing regular activities, and she's being like haunted by this man, which apparently comes from a carnival. Very weird. Now, a lot of these movies I've never seen before, so I can only go off like the research that I find online. So if you've seen any of these movies, please comment some more details down below. I feel like all these movies I'm mentioning, I'm definitely gonna watch around Halloween. And lastly, we have a movie called Eyes Without a Face, and already the title itself freaks me out. After causing an accident that left his daughter Christiane severely disfigured, the brilliant surgeon Dr. Jessii Vee works tirelessly to give the girl a new face. He does so, however, by kidnapping young women and attempting face transplants. He has been woefully unsuccessful to date. The doctor's world begins to collapse around him when his daughter realizes just what he has been doing. So this is such a disturbing concept for a movie to me. He basically makes himself go insane trying to restore his daughter's face. Obviously, he wants her to look normal again, but he goes and finds other girls to like switch faces with her. Even the poster for this movie is so eerie, and I was reading a lot online that so many people left the theater because they were just so disturbed and creeped out by this. I think this was one of the first black and white films that like went there, you know, like they went there. So yeah, those are all of the old creepy black and white films we're gonna be talking about today. If you want me to continue making videos like this, definitely give this video a thumbs up because I can turn this into a mini series. And if you would like to get this fairy necklace, I will link it down below. We also added a bunch of other necklaces on the website in case you're unable to get this one. I think we have like 3 other fairy designs. So yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!